Many of us have experienced at one point in time trying to do it all, but what happens when it becomes too much? In this episode, I'll be talking with Tirrea Billings on the power of growing where you are. Welcome to this episode of Composition. I want to thank you so much for being a part of the series. I'm so excited that I was able to fit into your probably very wild schedule. If you could tell our viewers like who you are, what you do.
Thank you again for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of your series. And, I follow you on Instagram. And so I just love just kind of following your journey too. And so I'm honored to be sharing mine. Um, in essence, I identify myself as an artivist, so an activist and artist, educator and storyteller for social justice. I started my career off in film and media studies, primarily doing docu-style video production. Slowly made my way into more of the communications and development space now, but still having that overarching theme of, again, like being a storyteller and using my love of telling stories to drive change in communities, especially marginalized communities. I'm a communications manager by day, producer and documentary filmmaker, nights and weekends. And then I'm also a PhD student at American University, studying communication at the intersections of media, tech, and democracy.
Wow. See, I told y'all I can't keep up, so I was like, I'm gonna just let her tell y'all because I don't want to mess that up. I knew a good chunk, but some of those things I did not know. So, okay, so throughout your journey, and now having such a diverse resume now at this point, what were the years like leading up, like really to the point of where you are now? Like, where was the time where you were like, okay, I want to go after this? Or I know a lot of people now say like pivoting, but I also look at it too as like growth and just kind of shifting into, kind of like I feel like the path or the journey you're really meant to be in. And I really love how you intertwine like artists and art. See, now you have me saying artists and activists into one, because I do feel like as people, we're not just meant to do one thing.
I've had the most like non-linear journey like ever. I actually, when I grew up, I was really into science and nature and the environment. I loved like, watching Animal Planet and National Geographic and stuff like that. And I was very much like an outdoors, like very like nature, environmental conscious type person. And so I had always thought that I wanted to grow up and be like a scientist, maybe like a wildlife biologist or environmental scientist or something of that sort, doing something with like animals and nature. Career complex half day, and I was in their animal science program, and then started undergrad, and I was an environmental science major, and like all of the science classes were going good, like environmental geology and a few other ones, A's and B's. And then something about like my biology class, like it just was not, the information was not sitting with me. Like I struggled really bad. Long story short, I ended up failing that class. Essentially, I was like, well, I guess I'm not going to be a scientist. So like, what can I do? What can I do instead? And so I had like almost like that was like my freshman year. And so I feel like my sophomore year was just me kind of bouncing around, trying to figure out like, okay, what else like am I interested in, or what else can I do? And I'd always had a love for writing. Like writing English was like always my strongest subject. It's like even growing up, I loved to write. I loved to like write like stories, like short stories, and I wrote poetry growing up too. So writing equally was a passion of mine as much as science was. And so I dabbled in that a little bit, and then I ended up taking a new media studies class my sophomore year, and I completely fell in love with it. I loved how hands-on it was, and how like creative I could be like in that field, and kind of merge like my love for storytelling and writing with also giving that like a visual representation with like film and photography and things like that. And yeah, after I transitioned from the previous college I was at to Western Michigan University, where I finished my bachelor's in film, video, and media studies. I remember having my first internship at the Public Media Network in downtown Kalamazoo. And from there, kind of just branched off and did other like internships and opportunities, doing like production assistant type work, cinematography work, things of that nature. And, as what's pushed in most film programs, like you graduate and try to get a job in Hollywood.
Mm.
So that's
Yeah.
what I thought I was supposed to do. Not as easy as they made it, or I wouldn't even say they made it seem like. I just thought it would be like, I did everything I was supposed to do, right? I was involved on campus, I had the internships, I had a little work portfolio. Like now someone's gonna give me a job as a PA, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
it was not that simple at all. I actually, so I graduated in December 2016 with my bachelor's. I applied all over the place. Like I swear I put in like 400 plus applications, like never got a call back, never got like anything. So
Mhm.
that post graduation like blues like definitely hit me like really strong, like early 2017, where I wasn't able to like land a job or land anything full time. That was hard for me to like navigate. I had a period of like, very like just severe depression, feeling like sorry for myself, feeling like I wasted my time in school, all that stuff. And then like March, April hit, and I was like, okay, well, I have to do something. So I had a camera at the time, and I had like a cheap microphone. And I was like, okay, I'll just start making my own stuff. And
Mhm.
so I just kind of, that gave me the idea of doing like a documentary series about different social justice organizations in Kalamazoo. I had, again, always, I think my love for like activism kind of came into like filmmaking. And even looking back, like when I was interested in science, like looking back now, I feel like I was more interested in like the advocacy side of like wanting to like save the trees, like,
Mhm.
protect the earth, like, restore like land for animals, blah, blah, blah. I cared more about that stuff than like the actual like, you know, like the
I
stages of
love it.
mitosis or whatever you like
Yeah.
in biology. And so yeah, I'm like, okay, well, I thought of like I had a professor who really taught me the value of using art for impact, and how documentary film specifically can be used as like tools for social justice and be used as vehicles for telling stories for and about like marginalized communities and voices that are often like silent. So I kind of took that framework and trying to develop my own like, okay, well, I want to uplift, the work that's being done in Kalamazoo. So I did like a series on that. And after I did that, I actually ended up getting my first like paid contract job from the Arca Center for Social Justice Leadership. I showed them like what I made. Again, it was just for fun on my own time. And they were like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like this is so good. Like we want to pay you to do like something like, more like streamlined for like our website. And I was like, wow, okay. And then she was like, okay, so like how much would you charge for that? He was like, no, like we have a budget. Like how's like, like 5K. And I was like, $5,000? Yeah, it's like that's too much. And so yeah, I did that promo video. And then there was another organization I featured in the series, the Society for History and Racial Equity.
Mm.
And their director was like, wow, you do really great work. We would love to have you like do kind of like contract work like on our marketing team. And so for like 2 or 3 years, I was like doing their marketing support and doing videos and like photography, like for their conferences and things like that, and supporting with other like promotional materials for things they had going on. Then 2018 is when I started branding myself under a company that I co-founded, Reflect Media. And we're a docu-style storytelling company with a mission to, tell stories about social justice, human rights, and the experiences of people of color, using like documentary and docu-style promotional video and photo content. I loved it. I met, so many people and was able to really become an expert like in my craft. I feel like that was the best way for me to like learn how to do the work. And looking back now, I'm grateful that I didn't like land a job out of college, because I learned much more like being a business owner and doing my own thing, and like expressing that how I wanted to, like in my own passions, versus just being a PA like on some set and like getting coffee. Like
Yeah.
no like judgment to people that who had that path, but like
Right.
I for me, like it was much more fruitful and rewarding for me to do what I did under. And I realized that I loved it, but full-time entrepreneurship is not for me. Um,
Hey,
maybe I'll go back
sometimes
to
it
it
is,
one day,
sometimes it's not.
but
Right. Yeah. You're like, whoa, okay. All right,
Mhm,
y'all. Back up.
mhm. And so I was like, okay. And also another hard thing was when I was doing that full time, it almost kind of made me burn out of my love for video production because I was doing it for money at that point and not for
Yeah.
like just the love of telling stories. And I
Mhm.
didn't like that feeling because I mean it was how like, I ate, it was how I paid my bills. So like it was more
Yeah.
of like I was taking on any project at that point versus like, projects that I really believed in and cared about.
Right.
And so I didn't like that like the more like capitalistic like mindset of owning a business like that part was not fun for me. So and I knew I didn't want to like go into like industry
Mhm.
just based off of like the experiences that I did have being a PA on like sets. Like I've done stuff for, like HGTV, TLC,
Yeah.
the Word Network, ESPN. Those experiences they were not they were not the most positive
Mhm.
just between like I never experienced any like overt racism or anything crazy, but it was just, the microaggressions and,
Yeah.
stuff like that. I experienced like being like the only woman on set or being the only like black person or only woman of color on set too. And it was just very, I don't know, it didn't feel very inclusive. I thought, oh, like I wouldn't mind being like, a teacher or, working with kids and then just doing the video stuff on the side, like back to just being like, a hobby, like something that I just am passionate about doing, not something that I'm doing to pay the bills. My master's program also at Western is what kind of made me learn about my love for like academia and teaching and research. That experience was way more than I could have ever imagined.
Mhm.
At the time I was just expecting to just do school and that's it.
Yeah.
I actually got an opportunity to be a teaching assistant um during my program. Like they called me like 2 weeks before classes started and it was like, hey, do you want to be a TA, you want to teach? And I was like, like I don't like speaking in front of people like that. I am not prepared. And they were like, well, your tuition will be covered. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, then one of the opportunities I'm like most grateful for because I that like helped me grow so much as a person, like with just like my public speaking and like my interpersonal like relationships, like development and stuff like that. Really was involved in like research and I presented at conferences and I want to keep doing this. Like, and it makes sense because like I loved school growing up. I've always
Yeah.
been gung ho for education. I've always been like, I don't know, like it makes sense as to why like I felt so fulfilled. Sometimes I feel like even more fulfilled, like when I was versus when I was doing like reflect. And yeah, so I finished my master's at Western in communication with a concentration on I really like studied like intercultural communication, communicating identity in terms of race and ethnicity, looking at like diversity in media, and also theorizing how like documentary film can be used like as tools for social justice, which is what I wrote my thesis on. I graduated in 2020. I had the opportunity to teach. I taught 2 online video production classes at Western, where I was able to design the classes to be not just about video production, but also teaching students how video can be used in very impactful ways for activism. And that was like the most amazing, like, even though it was online because like COVID and everything, was like, that was the affirmation that I needed, that like I want to like be in the classroom. I want to teach students that there is more to film in the industry than Hollywood big budget filmmaking. And that's a lot of what the feedback I got from like students after the end of the semester. Like, wow, like I had never been taught about film in this way. I didn't even realize that like you can use films for, impact and, to drive social justice causes and things of that nature, which was like my whole goal. Like that's all I wanted the students to
Yeah.
like take away from that. I'm now able to like combine like my love for storytelling, my love for filmmaking, and documentary production, but also like with teaching and working with students and showing them like the power of media and the importance of storytelling and storytelling for social justice specifically. Now I'm in my PhD program, first semester at American University, it's been kicking my butt. But I was like, man, like I knew it was gonna be a lot, but I don't know if I was like prepared for what it's been. I've been learning so much, especially about the intersections of technology in relation to communications and how tech is changing so much of the way that we communicate with each other and for each other and about each other. Yeah, and so I'll be done hopefully with that in 2025. So that, like that's where I am, and that's been my journey.
I love the fact that you have such a strong suit with your voice in the direction when it doesn't feel good, you move. Because
Mhm.
oftentimes I feel like your voice or how you feel or whatever doesn't matter. Make that money, grind, do da da da
Yeah,
da. And it's like, but what if I don't like it no more? You know, and then
right.
it's also kind of like, some unfortunately sometimes your peers or your family or whoever can almost sometimes make you feel bad for
Mhm,
because I was that kid. I was like, oh, I want to be a chef. And the next week,
mhm.
oh, I want to do this. Oh, I want to do that. It was constantly like pick something and stick with it. But
Mhm.
to see you constantly shift, not super far off, but shift within within this journey that you've been on is amazing. And then even being able to bring that voice back and tell other people, hey, you don't have to go into the Hollywood lane or this lane in order to make it or stand for something. I just think that's so important. And I feel like it's not getting talked about enough, which is also another reason why I was like, okay, I'm going to start this series. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm not going to lie. I've been loving every part of it. So that's been exciting too. What caused you to just say like, hey, I'm just going to figure it out for myself? Because I feel like a lot of us, like, I will speak for myself at least. Depression or just like mental health, it can hit people in different wavelengths. And sometimes it's so heavy that, especially I feel like as a creative too, it's hard to come out of. So what was that period like coming out of that and then literally going into I'm pitching myself and then they're like 5K, you're like, what? That's I was just in a really bad place. Got like how, like what was that like for you and what was that process? Because I think it's so easy to be like, oh, I woke up like this, or I just walked out the house and was like, let's go.
Yeah. I think I had to come to the realization that I like didn't have to be hired by someone to like be a filmmaker. Like I
Mhm,
could still like very much produce and create my own stuff, whether someone had employed me to do that, if I was just doing that on my own.
mhm,
And obviously like it would have been great to like have been able to get paid like in the beginning of like doing my own stuff, but that
yeah,
just wasn't my journey. And so I kind of just had to really pick my own self up. And especially since, my parents had just gifted me like a DSLR camera, that I was just like, I mean, I have the main like component of what I need to like tell stories. And so I should
yeah,
use that, even though I didn't like have like all the other equipment that I needed and all like the knowledge and the team of people. Like I didn't have all of that at the time.
mhm,
But I was still very much able to create something beautiful and magical. Like I just started with what I had and just went
yeah,
from there. And that's been like the biggest like lesson, and just in my adult life in general. I feel like just, growing where you are, I feel like that's very, very important because I feel like a lot of times, especially like with like social media and like, things like that, where
mhm,
it's like almost an expectation that like, oh, like we have to like have all of our ducks in a row before we like make a move. And like,
yeah,
no, sometimes you just gotta leap and like,
yeah.
see where that takes you. And so
Mhm.
yeah, I've been very much kind of living like with that same mindset just throughout my journey.
What has been the hardest project that you've worked on, whether that be like from a team sense? Because I know you mentioned like unfortunately with the HGTV or like the other platforms, like working with them not being seen or heard or however that may be. But also working on activist work too. I feel like that takes a very strong minded person. I'm sure a lot of us would probably want to speak up more on certain things, but I look at people like a Ava DuVernay, and so I think of somebody like that who's constantly talking about while they are amazing topics and there are things that need to be talked about, that can that's a lot to carry, and even going through whether it's the editing process, producing it, talking about it with the team, finalizing bits and pieces.
I feel like with every project had its like it's difficulties or things that were like stressful about it. um when I was on set of the various organizations that I had did freelance work for,
Mhm.
like the hardest parts about those were just like the lack of it's like I don't want to say inclusivity because like I was included, like they hired me. So like
Mhm.
it was just like I don't know, I still felt very othered and still
Mhm.
very much like an outsider. And I feel like that's just a combination of like that's just how the industry is. And on top of the fact that there is not a lot of diversity either. So and
Mhm.
it's still very much like it's about titles and hierarchy and it is a cutthroat industry. That process just made me figure out how important it is to have a team
Mhm.
because I was literally a one-man band. Like I was doing all of the shooting, all of the pre-production, all of the planning, all of the shooting, all of the editing. And it was a lot, which I also think that's another reason probably maybe why I burnt out of it so quickly and decided like even like beyond the point of like not liking to do it to like just focus on money, but just also like the like I just I burned out of it after working like that. Like I definitely have been making it a point to like as I do more production work, like as a producer, as a freelancer, making sure that like we have a proper team in place to like do everything that's required of creating a project beautifully and effectively. And I like producing, I'm going to stick to producing. I'm going to hire someone else to do the cinematography and someone else to do the editing and be the DP. And even hiring like production assistants and coordinators to do like more of the back end, like behind the scenes stuff, like and so yeah, that's been like the biggest like challenge that I had to overcome and learn like for myself. It's like I don't have to do it all.
Too, like it's hard asking for help or even admitting it, or I'm tired, or it's just even like you said, like I'm not interested in this part. Like I think that also gets overshadowed too. It's like do all the things and carry and be all. It's like no, no. I
Mhm.
want a team. I want to focus on what I'm good at, so that everything else can flow. Any successful habits or things that you've implemented, so where you like I'm getting better at this now.
Remembering like um fully like what I'm most interested in, most passionate about, what drives me, and sticking to that. And another thing, going to therapy, that has like been my saving
Yes.
grace. Yeah, yeah, like I know like we're in the age of everyone is kind of being more open to therapy and
Mhm.
especially the Black community, which I love to see. But yeah, I think it's something that I know I feel like I can't express enough that like, we are all human and we're all trying to figure it out. And it's okay to want to talk to someone or have extra support. Or honestly, like having a therapist just me feel like makes life feel less like impossible. Having just, support like around you, like community
Mhm.
around you, and remembering that you don't have to like do anything alone. Like even outside of work, just having people to like, love and care for you and like bounce ideas off of, and just having those connections.
Yeah.
I feel like are just super, super important.
I think it makes such a, especially on the therapy piece, because like you said, a lot of us, I would say, I feel like a lot of us were brought up, and really kind of like in general, but especially in the Black community, you don't talk about your stuff. You figure
Hmm.
it out. You go, you get through your stuff, you do what you got to do, and you hustle and you keep moving on, da da da. But nobody talks about what piles up as you keep
Yeah,
doing that,
yeah.
which can cause very unfortunate effects. What do you hope your legacy says to others and future generations to come, whether it's with Reflect or your students or something you're doing right now?
Focus on the vision that you have. Um, it is really important despite like who else and what else is like talking in your ear. And so yeah, I've always been a firm believer of doing it your way. And even if it doesn't make sense to others, sticking true to like what you want, and who you are and whatever success means to you.
Okay, so I know college, you talked about college and going kind of like back and forth between, well, not back and forth, but in and out, so to speak. And I know college isn't always for everybody. And some people, they may have to take a step back or move forward. Do you feel like college has propelled you in ways, or has it created hurdles? Um, or has it opened doors that maybe you don't think it would have given you if you didn't go, or if you didn't go back?
Hmm. Oh yeah. Again, I always preach like college is not the only avenue or the only route that you need to take to like become successful or chase your dreams or whatever. But I know for me, like it it was like it built a strong foundation for like where I am now. And like I needed that like type of structure, that type of guidance. On top of I already like mentioned that like I've always loved school. I've always been about education. And so that's how I saw my like path like in my career and my profession like molding like in, my college experience. Because I learned so much, like, not just like academically by like, just going to class and like, passing tests and stuff, but for
Yeah.
me, like much more than that. It was, making those interpersonal relationships and like having experiences that I wouldn't have had had I not, gone off to school. And like all the people that I've met and and even like the mentorship that I've, gained from like professors and people like who have studied this like their whole lives and have been a part of, the industry, et cetera, and just having that like that knowledge and those frameworks from them is just like it was worth like all the everything. At the same time, I always, what's meant for me like will be mine. And so had I not gone to school, I'm sure there would have been another path that I could have taken to still lead like maybe where I am. But um at the same time, I don't think I could have done without it because of my love for education and teaching. Like I feel like it was just almost a given.
So there's a quote that I pulled from one of your posts. I can't remember which one because I looked at so many things. But there's a quote that I pulled from one of your posts, and you say, "I am blossoming into my best self. I am loving every minute of this journey. I am growing into something greater than my wildest dreams. I am magic, culture, genius, excellence. I am me."
I said
I be reading stuff. People don't be thinking like I'm a real journalist. Like I be reading y'all. Okay, I can't remember everything, but I pull it and I put it on the paper.
that.
Um, I always skim through all of my guest stuff, and there are certain moments or things you guys may have said. I'm like, with that, what is the magic you have discovered in yourself that you hope others find in your work?
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm trying to remember what post that was from, but I think maybe at the time of always trying to remember to celebrate where I am.
Mhm.
I'm very much a like a what's next person. Like
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever like really allowed myself to bask in like anything I've ever like done or accomplished or created, or I'm always like what's next, or oh, I could have done that better. I got to do something else now to, make up for blah blah blah. And I feel like that's just the perfectionist in me that I have been working on in therapy, by the way. I think just trying to be more intentional about like being proud of like where I am and my growth. And I think at the time, if I'm remembering correctly, when I wrote that, that was during my master's program. And I think just like comparing to where I was in 2016 versus where I was then in 2018, went from like jobless, fresh out of undergrad with like nothing lined up. I mean, nothing to show for like all my hard work outside of a degree.
Paper, see, certified. Mm.
Yeah, right. Like, see, like I can do this. Hire
Right.
me. But, but from that to like having like a full-fledged business and working on my master's and really finding a love for teaching and cultivating what I think is very important and powerful, that students like understand, like, there is more to the discipline, and you can like create like lasting, systemic structural changes in communities, um, through like, the activism that can come with creating, visual like storytelling work, and honing in on that magic, and that capability of, being resilient, and showing that tenacity, and not giving up.
Mm,
Um, because I definitely could have, like, what if I did just like, oh well, I'm not, where I was, or nobody will hire me. So I guess I don't know, whatever people's journeys might lead them to like,
mhm.
not live out their full potential. But
Yeah.
no, I mean, I've never been a quitter. I might like pause or take a break, or like,
Mhm.
reset, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to get back up. So
Right. Right. Oh my gosh. I love this. I want to thank you so much for being a part of the series, to bring, voices and people like you onto the series to share your different avenues and how you've gotten to where you are now has just been, that's been the best part for me. For our viewers, where can we find you, follow you, keep up with your latest projects?
yes, yes. All of my handles are at Tirrea B. So TIRREAB. Including like, LinkedIn, like linkedin.com/ Tirrea B. Or if you type in my name, Tirrea Billings, I'll come up. But yeah, that's where I post a lot of my like professional like updates and things like that. Facebook if you want to know what's going on in my personal life. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. And we'll just keep up with whatever you have coming next.